Hello, welcome back once again, Professor Vivian. I'm really thankful to have you here. How are you doing today?
Hello, it's great to be here, and I'm really glad to be a part of this conversation. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How about you? How's your day going?
Yeah, everything is great here as well. So here in this podcast, we discuss about Nietzsche, and we were talking about Ecce Homo. How excited are you today to discuss this further?
Oh, I'm absolutely thrilled. Ecce Homo is such a fascinating work, and diving into Nietzsche's own reflections on his life and philosophy is always exciting. I can't wait to explore the nuances and share some insights with everyone. It's going to be a great discussion.
Yes, perfect. So in the previous talk, we discussed a lot about Nietzsche. We discussed the way he writes, the aphorism, the manner in which he writes, and all the critical aspects we saw, and how a kind of different kind of philosophy he was writing. And we also kind of found out that why should we read Nietzsche, and why should we trust Nietzsche. And you gave a very wonderful explanation. Now, in today's discussion, I really want to ask you with once Nietzsche says that little by little, he came to understand what every great philosophy to date has been. So, according to him, every great philosophy is a kind of personal confession of its author, which is a kind of unintended and unwitting memoir. So, in a way, this book, Ecce Homo, since we are covering this Ecce Homo, which is a kind of autobiographical work, which is a kind of memoir, but it is a different kind of memoir because we don't see his life's detail, but rather it's a philosophical aspect. It's a philosophical turn rather. So tell us a little more about it. What did he mean when he says that little by little I came to understand what every great philosophy to date has been, or personal confession of its author, so which is kind of unintended or unwitting memoir?
Absolutely. In Ecce Homo, Nietzsche indeed turns the lens inward, presenting his philosophy as a reflection of his own life and experiences. It's not a traditional memoir in the sense of a detailed chronological biography, but rather a deeply philosophical and introspective exploration. Through it, he reveals how his own personal struggles, values, and experiences have shaped his ideas. So in that way, it's a unique kind of memoir, one that's more about the philosophical essence of the author rather than just the events of his life. It's a fascinating blend of autobiography and philosophy.
Yes, as you rightly said, it is a fascinating blend of philosophy and autobiography. So this book, once we start reading this book, Ecce Homo, so the subtitle of this book is How to Become What You Are. So tell us a little about what is the meaning of the subtitle, and how should one interpret this subtitle, How to Become What You Are?
That's such a great point. The subtitle, How to Become What You Are, really encapsulates Nietzsche's idea of self-overcoming and authenticity. Essentially, Nietzsche is encouraging us to discover and embrace our true nature, to break free from societal expectations and external pressures, and to live in alignment with our own values and instincts. It's about a process of self-realization and self-creation where we actively shape who we are rather than passively accepting an identity imposed on us. So the subtitle is really a call to personal transformation and becoming the fullest version of oneself.
Right, as his philosophy deals with the becoming who you are, becoming a Superman, right?
Exactly. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch is really about transcending conventional norms and limitations to create a new, more powerful and authentic self. And it's about continuous growth and self-overcoming. And in that journey, we're constantly becoming who we truly are meant to be. A deeply empowering and transformative philosophy.
Right. So this chapter titled Forward, because since we are taking chapter by chapter, page by page. So here he starts about his own life, and he says the first thing that a reader would ask, that who am I? And then he goes on and he says that there is going to be a mismatch between the greatness of my task and the smallness of my contemporaries. So what was he trying to achieve from this statement? What was he trying to tell us? Whether he was trying to tell us that the greatness that he has, or a kind of the knowledge that he achieved, or the knowledge that he have, is not been resonated throughout the throughout the masses, or what's your intake on this? Because he was definitely writing a different kind of philosophy. He was actually kind of going against all the let's say whatever the philosophy we had so far, he was going against all of it. So tell us more about it.
Absolutely. And that's such an insightful observation. When Nietzsche mentions that there's a mismatch between the greatness of his task and the smallness of his contemporaries, he's really highlighting the idea that his philosophical vision was ahead of its time. He was essentially pointing out that the depth and the radical nature of his philosophy weren't going to be easily understood or embraced by the majority of people at that time. In a way, he was acknowledging that his insights were ahead of the curve, and that the philosophical world of his era wasn't ready to fully grasp or accept what he was proposing. It's almost like he was paving the way for future generations who would come to appreciate and understand his philosophy more deeply. It's a fascinating reflection on the nature of innovation and the challenges of introducing new ideas.
Perfect. As we see in his philosophy, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, when he talks about when Zarathustra descends from the mountain and he says, I have come too early, when he speaks about, when he gives his famous speech about God is dead and God remains dead, and we have killed him, how shall we comfort ourselves, the murderer of all murder. So there he is descending, and once he descends to the marketplace and he says, I have come too early to deliver the masses about the death of God. So a kind of similarity we see in this chapter as well, in this book as well. So tell us more about that, and give some insight to our listeners as well. And there's one more thing I want to point out, or I want to add, is that he says, consider whatever you want to consider me. Therefore he says, I'm such and such, whatever you think about me you can think, but above all do not mistake me. So he's always telling his listeners, he's always telling his readers that do not mistake me.
Absolutely. That's such a rich parallel. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, when Zarathustra says that he's come too early, it really underscores that sense of being ahead of his time and trying to convey profound truths that people aren't yet ready to receive. In Ecce Homo, Nietzsche does something similar by emphasizing that people may interpret him in various ways, but he wants to ensure that they understand the core of his message. He's encouraging readers not to reduce him to mere labels or misunderstand his deeper intentions. It's almost like he's inviting the reader to engage with his philosophy more deeply and to really grapple with the complexity of his ideas. In essence, he's urging us not to simplify him or his work, but to see the depth and the transformative nature of his philosophy. It's a really powerful invitation to engage deeply and think critically.
Right, absolutely. Although he always speaks about his reader, he is trying to, because at the end of the day, all the philosophers, they want to have their readers who can understand them. Even though Nietzsche says that the last thing I would promise would be to improve humanity. So why did he say that? Why is he not trying to improve the humanity? Because at the end of the day, all philosophical work actually improves in a certain way when it comes to humanity. Because philosophy is all about human being. It's all about how we live, the existence of human being. So why did he say that? Why was he different? Why, what was in his mind?
That's a really thought-provoking question. Nietzsche's statement about not promising to improve humanity actually reflects his skepticism about traditional moral frameworks and the idea of a one-size-fits-all improvement. He believed that genuine transformation comes from individuals who are willing to question, challenge, and overcome themselves rather than through a top-down approach to moral improvement. In other words, Nietzsche wasn't interested in imposing a universal standard of improvement. Instead, he focused on encouraging individuals to cultivate their own values and to strive toward their own potential. He was more concerned with the idea of individual excellence and the creation of new values that resonate personally rather than simply conforming to existing moral standards. And the perspective really showed how Nietzsche viewed philosophy as a deeply personal endeavor. He wasn't looking to create a universal blueprint for humanity, but rather to inspire each individual to challenge themselves and to forge their own path. In that way, he's more about awakening a spirit of self-overcoming and personal transformation rather than prescribing a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a very empowering approach because it puts the responsibility and the potential for growth squarely in the hands of the individual. So in that sense, Nietzsche's philosophy is both challenging and deeply empowering.
Yes, perfect. Now we come to the first chapter, which is titled as Why I'm So Wise. And we have seen all his chapters, all his 4 chapters starts with why I. So now he's affirming whatever he believes in, whatever he thought, or whatever his philosophy was. So he's actually affirming all his life's lesson. So tell us, when he talks about, he says that I'm both decadent and beginning. So he's both. So the fortunate thing about, his existence was perhaps its unique feature, which is his faithfulness. So he is a very faithful person, which is, again, if we translate it into Germany, it's called amor fati. So tell us more about what the term amor fati means, and how does Nietzsche uses this term, and why did he call himself as someone who is very faithful? And this is, his fortunate thing about, about his existence.
Absolutely, and that's such a rich aspect of Nietzsche's thought. The term amor fati literally means love of fate, and it's all about embracing everything that happens in life, both the joys and the suffering, as something essential and meaningful. For Nietzsche, it's about wholly accepting life as it is, without resentment or regret, and finding meaning in every experience. When Nietzsche calls himself faithful, he's really referring to this deep acceptance of his own fate and his life's journey. He's not just passively enduring what comes his way, but actively loving it and seeing it as integral to his growth and wisdom. It's a kind of radical affirmation of life where even the hardships are embraced as necessary for becoming who he is. So when he affirms that he's both decadent and beginning, he's acknowledging the complexity of existence in his own journey. He's both reflecting on the wisdom he's gained and recognizing that there's always a new beginning, a continual evolution. It's this attitude of embracing his life fully with all its complexities that really defines his philosophy. It's truly a powerful and transformative way of looking at life.
That's wonderful insights you have provided. So he also speaks that he's both decadent and he is also a beginning. So we have similar philosophy in East, which is a philosophy of totality, where if something ends, then there is always beginning in the ending.
Sure, it's really fascinating how that idea of cyclical existence and the intertwining of endings and beginnings is reflected in both Western and Eastern philosophies. In the East, we often see that same concept of totality and the interconnectedness of all things, where every end is also a new beginning. It's like the natural cycles of life where one phase transitions into another, and that continuity is always present. Nietzsche's perspective aligns in a sense with that Eastern idea where even in acknowledging decadence or an ending, there's always a seed of a new beginning. It's a recognition that life is an ongoing process of transformation and growth, and by embracing that perspective, we can find a meaning and richness in every moment, no matter how it unfolds. It's a beautiful way of looking at life's journey as a continuous and meaningful evolution.
Perfect. So previously you spoke about Nietzsche always saw his life as a positive aspect, but I really want to ask you one question, and I believe that every listener must be having this question, that can we really live without guilt? Because Nietzsche's philosophy, Nietzsche's life-affirming philosophy always tells us that we do not have to live our life with a lot of guilt, with a lot of, because this is a part of life and we should embrace it. But is it really truly possible that we can really live without guilt? Like if something had happened, or let's say if something might happen with us, because are we really that strong?
Such a profound question, and it really touches on a core aspect of Nietzschean philosophy. Nietzsche definitely encouraged us to move beyond conventional guilt, especially the kind that comes from external moral systems or societal expectations. He believed in taking ownership of our lives and creating our own values, and in doing so we can transcend the kind of guilt that comes from feeling inadequate or from being bound by outdated neural codes. However, it's also true that human beings, we do feel guilt and remorse at times, and that's part of our emotional and psychological makeup. Nietzsche wasn't necessarily advocating for a life completely free of all guilt, but rather for a more constructive relationship with it. He wanted us to learn from our experiences and to use that self-awareness to grow and to become stronger individuals. In essence, it's not about completely eliminating guilt, but about transforming it into something constructive and using it as a catalyst for personal growth. It's definitely a journey and a process of continually learning and evolving.
Right, it's a process of transformation. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so now as we move forward in this chapter, Why I'm So Wise, now he starts this chapter, or the first chapter starts with something he's trying to relate his life with his father, because he had a connection with his father. Not so much because his father died quite early. And he's trying to compare his own life with his father when he says that my father died at the age of 36, and which was a kind of course, it's a morbid and being destined only to pass by. But then he says my life also declined particularly at the same age, around 36, when he was somewhere around 1879, when he said that he resigned his professorship in Basel. So he was working as a professor, he was teaching there, and then he resigned in 1879, and at that time he was somewhere around 36 years of age, and he calls this moment as his minimum, and he wrote this book called The Wanderer and His Shadow. So please let us tell us a little more about this. Tell us his life as a professor. Tell us his life about his father and how he connects himself with his father in this chapter.
Absolutely. And that connection between Nietzsche and his father is really quite poignant. Nietzsche's father passed away when he was very young, and that early loss definitely left a mark on him. When he reached the age of 36, it was a pivotal moment for him as he was stepping away from his academic career in Basel. This resignation symbolized a sort of turning point, a moment of decline, but also a moment of deep reflection and rebirth. In The Wanderer and His Shadow, Nietzsche explores many philosophical themes that reflect his own experiences and insights. The idea of the minimum that he describes at that age really captures the sense of a low point, but also the potential for renewal and deeper wisdom. It's as if he's looking back at his own life and recognizing that every decline also carries the seed of a new beginning. So in that way, his reflections on his father and his own life at that age really show a deep philosophical engagement with the cycles of life, the interplay of loss and renewal, and the ongoing journey toward self-understanding and growth. It's truly a rich and layered exploration.
Okay, wonderful. So one question that I always ask to myself, and whenever I read Nietzsche, it's very fascinating when he says that, because if we look in the Western philosophy, so most of let's say the major philosophers like Hegel, Kant, or even Karl Marx, they use this term called dialectical. I mean, the entire philosophy of Hegel is based upon the dialectical principle. If you remove the dialectical, then the entire philosophy will collapse. Even though dialectical is very important, as we see in Socrates and later philosophers as well, but why do Nietzsche condemns this dialectical form? And what's the irony there? Why is he moving away from this dialectical, and why is he not liking this kind of philosophy or this kind of argument? Tell us more about it.
That's a really intriguing point. Nietzsche's relationship with the dialectical method is definitely complex. While philosophers like Hegel and Kant relied heavily on dialectics to develop their ideas, Nietzsche was more skeptical of that structured binary approach to understanding truth. For Nietzsche, the dialectical method often seemed too rigid and overly focused on logical contradictions and resolutions. Nietzsche was more interested in the multiplicity of perspectives and the idea that truth isn't a fixed point, but something that's constantly evolving and shifting. He was more concerned with the dynamic and often chaotic nature of human experience and the complexity of existence, rather than trying to resolve everything into neat logical oppositions. In addition, Nietzsche was critical of the idea that philosophy should be purely rational and systematic. He valued intuition, instinct, and the richness of human life that can't always be captured in dialectical terms. He wanted to break free from the constraints of strict logical structures and instead embrace a more fluid, dynamic approach to understanding life and meaning. So the irony is that while dialectics and often a systematic way of thinking, and Nietzsche believes that it sometimes limited our ability to fully appreciate the complexity and depth of human existence. It's a fascinating contrast and really shows how Nietzsche's philosophy encourages us to think beyond conventional frameworks and embrace a more multifaceted perspective.
So Nietzsche, in this book, he is a kind of trying to draw some kind of parallel with dialectics and his, in his health. Because he says that his blood runs slowly, and he managed to detect some kind of fever in him because constantly he was sick, and due to which he also had to quit his job. But then when he went to see the doctor, when the doctor treated him for a quite while for a nervous disease, ended up saying that his nerves are all good, his body is all good, his body is working fine, but the problem is that he is the one who is nervous now. So doctor himself was nervous because doctor could not treat him. So tell us this story and tell us how this dialectic influenced kind of in a way, because he sees dialectic as a symptoms of decadence, and his health is also a kind of decadence. This is precisely why in the first chapter he says that I'm also a decadence, and then later he would criticize about decadence, but here he's actually trying to affirm that he is a kind of decadence as well, because in order to be a decadent, in order to be a different kind of person, you must have to fall in certain places. So is there a kind of connection with his health, with his philosophy?
Absolutely, and you've touched on something really profound. Nietzsche's own physical health struggles were deeply intertwined with his philosophical outlook. He often experienced various ailments and a general state of frailty, and this physical condition inevitably influenced his perspective on life and on philosophy. In a way, Nietzsche saw his own health challenges as a reflection of the broader theme of decadence and decline. He didn't just mean decadence in a purely moral or cultural sense, but also in terms of vitality and the life force. His slow blood circulation and the absence of a fever, for example, were symbolic in a way of the kind of inner tension and struggle he experienced. Even though his body might have been physically sound in certain ways, he still felt a profound sense of inner decay and the kind of existential tension. So by connecting his health to his philosophical ideas, Nietzsche was emphasizing that the physical state of a person can reflect and influence their philosophical outlook. It's almost as if his own experiences of physical frailty mirrored the broader cultural and philosophical decline he observed around him. In that sense, his personal struggles were not just individual issues, but also reflections of larger philosophical themes. it's a fascinating and deeply interconnected perspective.
That's true. And then at the end he says that I become master of anything. Then it was of this, which means he's talking about decadence. He became the master of decadence. So in order to rise, he must fall once, right?
Exactly. That's a key insight into Nietzsche's philosophy. He really saw decadence not just as a state of decline, but also as a crucial part of the process of transformation and renewal. By fully confronting and understanding decadence, he believed that one could ultimately transcend it and emerge stronger. In other words, it's through facing the depths of decline that one can truly learn, grow, and ultimately rise to a new level of strength and wisdom. So in that sense, decadence becomes a kind of teacher or a necessary phase that helps one cultivate deeper insight and resilience. It's a powerful idea that really underscores the dynamic nature of life and the importance of embracing both the highs and the lows in order to truly grow. It's definitely a fascinating, deeply nuanced perspective.
Wonderful. So as soon we move from chapter 1 to chapter 2, we find this contradiction, because when I was reading this chapter, I found there's a contradiction between the chapter 1 and the chapter 2, because in chapter 1 he's actually dealing with the decadence, he's dealing with his health, he's dealing with his bad health actually, and then he says, aside from being a decadent, then I am also the opposite. So he's also the opposite of the decadence. So tell us what opposite he's talking about. Tell us more about this, and how he sees this life, away from this decadence.
Absolutely, and that's a really insightful observation. In the first chapter, Nietzsche certainly dives deeply into the theme of decadence and the sense of decline that he's experiencing, but what's really fascinating is that he doesn't stop there. He so emphasizes that alongside this decadence, there is a kind of life affirmation and vitality that he embodies. In other words, the opposite of decadence for Nietzsche is this life affirming strength and the will to power. It's the ability to embrace life fully, even in the face of challenges and decline. It's about finding meaning and purpose in the midst of struggle and continuing to push forward and create meaning. So as we move into the second chapter, we see how Nietzsche starts to explore this idea of overcoming and transforming the very conditions that might lead to decadence. It's about not letting decline define him, but rather use that as a stepping stone towards something greater. It's a really compelling dynamic, and it shows how Nietzsche embraces both the challenges and the potential for growth that come with them.
Perfect. You have rightly said it. Therefore, he says later that, I turn my will to health, to life, into philosophy. So whatever he had, whatever he felt, whatever whatever health he had, he actually tried to improve that health. And for take note, he says that the years when my vitality was at its lowest, where I was stopped being a pessimist. So this was the time when he stopped being a pessimist, and he tried to move out of that pessimism. He tried to move out of a kind of hell, because of course when your nerves are bad, when you are not in good health, then of course you would feel always pessimistic. But then he said that I stopped being a pessimist, and then he started thinking a kind of positivity. He started bringing some kind of positivity within himself. So in a way, Nietzsche is trying to tell us that Superman is within us. The concept of Ubermensch, which is within us, we have to find ourselves. We have to affirm. First of all, we need to affirm who we are. We need to understand who we are, and from there onwards, we can do certain things. We can improve ourselves. We can try to improve ourselves, right? So this is where he ends this chapter when he says, well then, I am the opposite of decadent. So please tell us a little more about it, if I have missed something.
You've captured it really well. Nietzsche's journey is indeed about transforming that initial sense of decadence and decline into a powerful affirmation of life. By moving away from pessimism and embracing a more life-affirming perspective, he really highlights that the potential for the Übermensch, or the higher self, is something that we cultivate from within. It's about embracing our own strengths, our own vitality, and ultimately transforming our challenges into opportunities for growth. In that sense, the journey from decadence to life affirmation is a continuous one, and it's rooted in self-acceptance and the will to overcome. By affirming who we are and acknowledging both our strengths and our weaknesses, we can find that inner resilience and really embody that transformative power. So in the end, Nietzsche's message is very much about embracing the full spectrum of human experience and using it as a springboard for growth. It's really a beautiful and empowering philosophy.
I think there is a network issue, but anyway, now we are going to end this conversation, and we have covered 2 chapters today from part 1, and the chapter 3 would be discussed tomorrow. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm really glad to have you here, Professor.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our discussion today, and I'm looking forward to diving into chapter 3 with you tomorrow. It's always a pleasure to explore Nietzsche and these philosophical ideas together. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.